Good morning and welcome to the second half of this week's News from the Camp House. This is Herman Brune and we're here today with Mr. Shane Mahoney. Now he is, by all practical knowledge that I have, the leading expert on the North American wildlife conservation model. You see Shane at all types of hunting shows, all kinds of conservation programs. Shane knows he is the person you go to, and what we talked about in the first half was the history of the North American wildlife conservation model, and whereas I thought this name had been in place for a long time, actually the actual title of it, the actual giving it a name, it's been in practice since forever, but giving it a name actually happened in the early and mid 90s, and then by what we were talking about over the next decade, it was really sharpened up and refined, and now we're really pushing for everyone to understand it. And go ahead, Shane. Yeah, I'm talking about it. I need you to talk about it.
Well, I just think that, as we were saying in the first half of the show, that the idea that we have a name for it, a title for it, is very helpful, because you can walk into a room and you can raise this term now, and at least in informed circles, people know that you're not just talking about one simple little concept. You're talking about all the historical developments that took place, the rise of science, the rise of strong enforcement, the rise of very specific dedicated funding mechanisms, such as the Pittman-Robertson funding, the Wallop-Rowe, Dingell-Johnson packages in the United States, all of the research entities that developed at universities, all those research programs and so on, all the management programs and applied policies that come out of state and provincial agencies and many federal agencies as well. All of these complicated pieces that deserve and often require their own dialogue and discussion, you can encapsulate when you talk to someone and say, oh, we're talking about the North American model of wildlife conservation. Mm-hmm. And remember that this continent, this is something, and I agree with you, by the way, entirely, that this ought to be something taught in schools, because it ought to be taught, and it ought not to be taught necessarily in a wildlife or a conservation program even. It could be taught just as a part of American and Canadian history.
Right.
Because, what really happened was we had, one of the great devastations for wildlife occurred in North America when the European settlers came here and thought that the wildlife resources were just inexhaustible. Mm-hmm. They'd never seen anything like this continent, the unlimited lands. They came from, densely packed, densely populated European countries. They just couldn't get over this idea of this vast landscape and all these new species and the abundance of them. 20 to 30 million bison, maybe 5 billion passenger pigeons.
Right.
They just couldn't. They couldn't grasp it really, and they certainly couldn't understand anything about its limits. And therefore, the harvesting and the commercial use and sale of everything from robins to shorebirds to bison to egret feathers, you name it. Anything that came from the wild and from wildlife was sold for big money. Mm-hmm. In the early part of the 20th century, a pound of egret feathers used to adorn women's hats and so forth was worth more than a pound of gold. Huh. And the result of that was that we just decimated wildlife on this continent at a scale that's almost unprecedented in human history. And we went down to circumstances where most of the common species today, name them, elk, moose, black bear, wood duck, wild turkey, white-tailed deer, etc. Many of the very common species that we identify as iconic today, if we'd had an Endangered Species Act in 1910, for example, a lot of them would have been on it. because their populations were so depleted.
Yes.
And yet today, we have turkeys in our driveways, right? We have white-tailed deer everywhere. We have tremendous elk populations. And all of this incredible recovery was the targeted outcome, the intention, when the original tenets of the North American model were put in place and became the mission and responsibility not only of our government agencies, like our state agencies and our provincial agencies, but also became the mission of so many non-governmental organizations that use volunteerism and fundraising and so on and so forth to assist wildlife species of various kinds. And the end result is today we again have a continent, Canada and the United States, where these wildlife species are incredibly healthy, and in some cases maybe more than healthy. Snow geese, for example, Canada geese, whitetails in some cases, and so on. And that doesn't happen easily. But what is even more miraculous about the North American model is that we not only recovered those particular species that were so depleted, we also used them continuously by harvesting and then feeding, using the meat, sharing the meat, with our families, with our friends, with our colleagues, and so on and so forth. So we didn't just protect them, in quotation marks, we conserved them. In other words, we used planned, regulated harvests as very much a part of the rescue mission. So we have ended up with much increased wildlife populations, which everyone wants to see. And at the same time, we were able to harvest millions and millions and millions and millions. In fact, tens and hundreds of millions, if you look at it since the turn of the 20th century, of these wild animals, and still have them in abundance.
All right.
That's the Holy Grail.
Yes, sir. All right. So now we'll dice it up a little bit. What happens with predators? Because, as you know, in the last, since 94, there's been the big wolf controversy up in the Rockies, and now they're doing the same thing with a controversy with grizzlies. And it's all based around, is there enough room on this earth for humans and wildlife?
Yeah. Look, that is a very big and a very powerful question. Let me start my answer by saying this. Despite the controversy around these big predators, the grizzly bears, the wolves, the mountain lions, the black bears to some extent, and so forth, despite the controversy, every person in Canada, including every hunter in the United States and Canada, ought to be proud of the fact that we have been able to maintain these big predators in reasonable numbers into the 21st century. Despite the controversy, we ought to be proud of the fact that we still have grizzly bears, and we still have the polar bears, and we still have the wolves, because we could have a continent without them.
Right.
I would like to ask every thoughtful hunter listening to this show, do you really want a continent that does not have the great bear? Do you really want to have a continent that does not have wild wolves anywhere? And I think the answer for most hunters is no, they don't want that. But of course, what they do want is they want to know that the predators can also be managed in a regulated, legal way, just as we regulate moose harvest or turkey harvest or deer harvest or whatever it might be. And of course, there is no question that there is human-wildlife conflict associated with the big carnivores, particularly with the grizzly bears, polar bears to some extent in the north, and also with wolves to a lesser extent. There is a conflict with humans that is of a different nature than sometimes the conflict we have with other species. If you're a farmer, obviously you can have a lot of conflict with overabundant deer populations or elk populations if you have a ranch or whatever,
Right.
Taking feed. I mean, those are conflicts too. And of course, we don't recommend getting rid of all the elk and all the white-tailed deer as a result of it. But with the big carnivores, it's different. Psychologically, emotionally, physically, they can hurt you. They can kill you. They can eat you. And they can also, of course, kill your livestock and, do other things. They can damage your property and so forth. But just think about this fact, that we have over 1 million black bears on this continent. Over 1 million.
Okay.
And yes, they do damage, and there's no question that they do kill sometimes human beings, and they sometimes very deliberately kill human beings, more so than grizzlies, in fact, because grizzlies usually react to a confrontation with cubs or with the prey they've taken down, but black bears will sometimes very, very purposefully predate on human beings.
Huh.
But we have 1 million of them, at least.
Okay.
And we manage to live with them, by and large. The real question for us, and the real question for them, for the mountain lion, for the grizzly bear, and for the wolf, is whether we can find room for us all. And my belief is that the North American model definitely espouses finding room for us all. But I think we might as well be grown-ups about it, adults about it, and recognize that it's never going to be easy to coexist, particularly where there are a lot of people and a lot of these big carnivores. It will always be contentious. It will always be difficult to adjudicate what is the best thing to do. But two things I can say. One is the very thought of a North American continent without the great bear is incomprehensible to me. It cannot be. It cannot be on our list of possibilities. The second thing is we cannot just believe that we can have large numbers, in some cases even small numbers, of these very large carnivores that are potentially dangerous and so forth, living in real close, intimate contact with human beings, and not expect there to be problems.
Right.
And where is the balance?
Well, it's something we'll always be reaching for. Yeah.
Yes, I totally agree. And that's the important point. The important point is that we continue to reach for it.
Right.
We continue to try for it. That's what conservation is about. Trying to find the possibilities in the impossible.
There you go. All right, Shane, thank you. Sorry we're out of time. I think you and I could probably just go on and on. But I really appreciate you being with me and my listeners this morning.
Well, it was a genuine pleasure. Anytime you want to invite me back, please do so. And take care of yourselves and take care of Texas.
Oh, we'll do it. We'll do it. Okay, hang on just a second. Folks, I hope you got something out of this morning's edition of News from the Camp House, visiting with Mr. Shane Mahoney. Now, you've just heard the #1 expert in the world. So, that's what we do here. If I don't know something, I'm going to go find somebody that can answer the questions. Now, this weekend's edition was also brought to us by the Shaw's Bend Social Club. Country club folks don't have a country club. Everybody go out right now. Have a great weekend. Have a lot of fun. Be safe. And y'all just remember, pretty much any day is sure a good day to be out in the woods.